Welcome back to the Manestream podcast. My name is Ian Stewart, and today I want to talk about something that's been on my mind for the past, I want to say, couple years or so, and that's streaming, and mainly how I feel like it's had this sort of negative effect on entertainment, the movie and film, the movie and television industry, and how it's I feel like it mainly comes down to three things. One is how it affects the preservation of certain movies and shows. Two is how it affects the livelihoods of the people who are working in the industry, mainly actors and writers, and I'll get into the industry as a whole down the line. And third, just how it's affected people's viewing habits, because I feel like the audiences play a part in the streaming industry as well, not just the studio system as a whole. So I'll start with just the whole way that streaming services treat the word is content, which is a word that I've kind of grown not to like, and mainly because I feel like it devalues the art that's on the platforms. Like, it turns into like a, because the way I see streaming, it's like a library. It's like a big just library of different media, and I feel like it's kind of like I'm mainly thinking of one platform in particular, Max, and how it treats some of the shows and movies that it has license to. Mainly, the whole thing that kind of kicked off this podcast to begin with was a lot of the handling of the Looney Tunes property in the past few months, or I'll say in the past couple of years. Because mainly I'm a big Looney Tunes fan, and I feel like it kind of shows this disrespect, I'll say, towards properties, and this is mainly, well, I feel like there's two things, because Looney Tunes is an older property, but I feel like the way that streaming services handle newer series is even worse than how it handles older shows. But getting back to my point with Looney Tunes, they just scrapped the entire library of old shorts and other shows that came after the shorts, and like, they own the rights, so they're gonna do what they want. And I feel like something at the root of all of this is the film industry is for profit. It's like any other company. If something doesn't meet the bottom line, then it's gonna get cut. And I feel like that's probably the summarized explanation for a lot of decisions that are related to streaming and Hollywood as a whole. But I feel like, as far as, because it's a weird relationship when you combine art and industry, it's a weird sort of relationship. And I feel like preservation is one reason why I feel like physical media is super important, because people argue that, well, with streaming, it's more like you have it, like it's yours, but it's not yours. It belongs to the platform. It's always belonged to the whatever company, whether it's Warner Brothers or Disney, Universal, or whoever. But the streaming platform, they have their hands on whatever show or movie you like, not not you. Like they allow you to view this digital copy of whatever piece of media that you like. Whereas I feel like, and this is another subject, like physical media and how it's, because it goes beyond just movies and TV, it goes into music and video games too. But for the sake of films and TV, I feel like having physical media is like a good insurance policy. That's the only word I can think of. Insurance policy for making sure that these pieces of history don't disappear and fizzle out. Because on the one hand, I know someone could argue that, well, it won't fizzle out because it's on a platform. It's digitized, but I feel like that's not really as, I don't want to say safe, but not as secure as you think. Because once it's like, if something's only available really on a platform, like on a streaming site, and it gets taken off, whether it's like an old movie or something new, well, especially it's something new, like something specifically designed to be put on the platform. If that gets taken away, then the show fades from history. Like it's gone, and the show is gonna be lucky if it had a physical release, like a Blu-ray release. Which most of the time, like I'm thinking of Stranger Things, which I feel like that's kind of like an exception. Like that was a massive, excuse me, a massive show for Netflix, so that was more likely to get a physical release on Blu-ray or like a steelbook release. Other shows on Netflix and Max and Hulu aren't as lucky as that. Like they don't have the same sort of pop culture reach that Stranger Things does. So, and this is something I'll get to later. If it's not instantly popular like that first season, like if they drop the first, I was gonna say 11 episodes, but usually it's like 8 episodes, 8 or 9, in a first season. If it's not like a massive sweeping success, then that one season's all you get, and you're gonna be lucky if you do manage to stay on the platform. If you do have one season, which I know technically when it came to network TV, like in broadcast television, there was always a chance you would only get 13 episodes. Well, I think 13 is the max, the max amount of episodes for a season, or at least on TV it was, like broadcast TV. And if you didn't meet the ratings or didn't get good enough ratings, you were gonna get canceled. So it's not. I understand the fact that if you don't get the numbers to justify your existence, then you get cut. So I won't say this is like a totally unique thing to streaming, but I feel like with streaming specifically, there's a greater chance of said show being forgotten, just if it doesn't meet the viewer count that the streaming platform really wants. So I feel like that's kind of the Cliff Notes version. I could go off, if I had like an hour or so, I could go off and just talk about how get into the real implications of what classifying entertainment, I won't, or not just entertainment, just art in general, as content, and treating it as like this, just like another commodity just to be boxed off. Like you have this sort of thing, and but I'll keep it at that. And I'll get into how streaming has affected the people who work on these movies and on these shows. And I feel like this is another thing that got me interested in doing this podcast, because I've been seeing a lot of interviews from actors. Well, and I've been keeping up with the strikes from 2023. I think that was when the Writers Guild and the Actors Guild kind of locked arms together to demand better wages, demand better. Well, they demanded also better working conditions, but I think also one of the major things was receiving adequate revenue from these studios, from the companies, for their labor, because that's essentially what it is. It's most people don't see acting as labor, especially like TV and film acting, because we assume that if you're an actor, then you're at least a millionaire, not instantly a billionaire, but most acting isn't just the world of TV and films. There's stage acting, and there's theater stage acting, and that's a whole other thing. But I feel like when it comes to revenue, I feel like this is kind of like the gist that I've gotten from reading different articles and watching people who are in the industry and people who are tuned into the industry talking about the short-sightedness of some of these studios would just like initially, like I'll say around, I think 20, like in the late 2010s, I'll say, when streaming really branched off beyond just Netflix and Hulu. Like Disney Plus got in, I think technically HBO had its own platform. I think before HBO Max, but I think it was called HBO Go, but then they made HBO Max. And I remember when these first started kicking off, they were announcing so many different spin-off projects and things made specifically for the streaming services platform, like The Mandalorian for Disney Plus and other things for these platforms I'm not thinking of right now. But I feel like they kind of underestimated just how different the return for these shows are in comparison to TV, because the way TV worked, the way shows on cable or broadcast TV made a profit was from ad revenue. Like that was mainly the only reason that the shows got, I don't want to say got funding, but made enough revenue to disperse between the people who work on them is ads. So like in the commercial break, you'll get Gerber, you'll get Hasbro or something like that. I'm thinking about Hasbro. I'm thinking of animation, and some of these animation channels like Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon. Part of how they made a profit off the shows was from advertiser money, and that was a big part of how TV shows made a profit, by the company collaborating with a company to make money from their product. Well, both are making money for their product. And when it comes to movies, let's say you have a movie that didn't really make its money back in theaters, like it only grossed X million, like I would nice and say 15. Like, if you have a $90 million budget and you only make 11, 15 million, there was still at the time, like I'll say from the past 20 years or so, you could rely on DVD sales and like Blu-ray sales to like supplement like DVD VHS back when VHS, like in the 80s and 90s. A lot of movies from then didn't do well in the box office, but they became like icons through being released on video and eventually being released on DVD. But now you don't really have that physical media. This is what I was getting back to. That safety net's kind of gone when a movie leaves theaters and goes to streaming. And that same movie that would have been saved had it not made its money back in theaters, it's definitely not going to make its money back if it goes to streaming. It'll make something, but in comparison to DVD, it's pennies, really. And like getting back to revenue for actors and these writers, it's like it was still not great before, especially depending on like, and there's a whole system like union versus non-union work for artists, not art, well, yeah, it's an art, actors and writers as a whole. But just in general, like the trickle down of giving, I don't want to say adequate revenue, but livable revenue for these individuals is not as, it's not as well as it should be. And I feel like the industry is kind of not backpedaling, but they're trying to rectify not making money back for their shows in the past by doing extra measures to make a profit from this thing that's not going away. I don't see streaming fizzling out because people felt the same way about TV in the 50s and 60s, or mainly in the 50s. That it's just a fad. Well, everything in the entertainment industry is seen as a fad for the most part, until it isn't, until it becomes the standard. And I feel like streaming will become the standard, so you either adapt or you fade. That's kind of how I see this sort of situation. And I imagine that's how studio executives see the situation. So something that they've done is they've incentivized bundles, like bundling platforms. Like you'll have a Disney Plus bundle with Hulu, and then ESPN Plus and the other companies that Walt Disney Studios owns. That's one way people, or studios, I should say, make their money back through bundling, like making sure that they can maximize as much profit, people make as much profit from people subscribing to a bundle as possible. And also, even if you do have a non-ad subscription to a site, you're still gonna get ads. Like I don't have ads for Disney Plus, but there's still gonna be ads, and I feel like these companies are realizing that ads served a purpose. Well, they always knew ads served a purpose, but I feel like part of the mythos of streaming was convenience, and that's that's the third point I'll get to. But streaming was pitched to audiences as like you don't have to deal with sit through commercials. You'll have everything you want in one place. Like everything under this umbrella, it's all yours. And that's not the case. I don't think it ever was the case, but it's definitely not the case now. So yeah, adding ads is how these studios are ensuring that they make their money back. And I'm trying to see, because I'm looking at an article from The Drum, which is, its title is Streaming Has Finally Become Profitable by Returning to the Cable Network, or Cable Playbook, which is essentially ads. It's a collaboration. It's a net. Like this is branches off, spins off to different things. Like things don't exist in a vacuum. I feel like that's what mainly. I feel like the studios know this, but I don't feel like audiences really know this as much as they think they do. They kind of treat media and the industry like it exists in a vacuum when it's this wide spider web. I'll call it that. And increasing prices. That'll be the last part on the second bit. People don't like I don't like the increase in the subscription pricing, but it's a business. They want to maximize profit. They will do that if they really want to. Well, I feel like in a business you kind of have to maximize profit, or else you will fizzle. And I'll kind of bring this all home by just kind of talking about the culture of streaming, that it's kind of adapted people to engage with media in a different way than in the past. Because I feel like I'm mainly thinking of like the binge sort of, I don't want to call that well, it is a strategy. Like I feel like it's become more of a thing in the past 10 years, mainly with stuff like Stranger Things, because I feel like that was the first big show that had this format where the episodes get released all at once, and people can binge an entire season in a span of however long someone decides to watch a season. And I feel like for 2 years, 3 years, I'll be nice and say 4, it worked. Or it worked for audiences. I don't really feel like in the long term it really works for certain shows, because there's already a very narrow sort of pathway for certain types of movies and shows to get made. Like there's only certain things that will be allowed to like make it to production, things that aren't really risky. But like I said earlier, that's a whole other subject. But when it comes to streaming, these platforms are going to maximize or prioritize shows that are bingeable, and like making sure that 10, maybe I feel like the streaming number is 6, maybe depending on the show, 13 episodes, 40 minutes to an hour long, and for certain shows that can work, but I definitely don't feel like that's the format that every show should have. Cause I feel like it's kind of crossed into other shows as well, that and shows that don't really have the don't fit the bench model, don't if they don't kick off in that first season, like if they don't generate like global hype like around a first season, then it fades like off the platform and out of people's minds. Uh, and I feel like getting back to, because I feel like I brought up convenience before, but I feel like having being able to just engage whenever you please with shows specifically. I mean, because movies, unless it's made for the platform, that's a different thing. But I feel like a movie has its time in the theaters, but it also that's where its primary time is until it goes to streaming. But I feel like with shows mainly being on streaming platforms now, it's I feel like it kind of has a worse sort of deal because of just the nature of the bench model and how I feel like it's not good for the shows. Like it's just weird to me, or like it's become weird because like before I used to feel really good about finishing like 4 or 5 episodes, not five, I'll say 3 episodes in a day. But I feel like, and I'm getting back to what I was trying to say earlier, just breezing through a season, it doesn't really have as much staying power versus having a show that has 22 episodes like weekly, like a episode drops every Thursday, Friday. You have that episode for that week, you get to ruminate on it, but then next week there's something. And I feel like there's also like a communal sort of element to television, or there was like on cable, where I feel like limitations, like people being limited, not being able to just engage with media whenever they felt like it, kind of like inconvenience was kind of a good thing. I feel like, at least as far as it comes to entertainment, like most people don't like being inconvenienced, neither do I, but I feel like limitations kind of create sort of kind of forces people to engage together. And this applies to stuff like music as well, but mainly talking about TV, having limitations and the sort of like a limit of sources people could engage with kind of meant that people were more on the same page. Even if someone's not in the sitcoms or like cartoons, most people, like people who are, they're mainly watching the same sorts of shows. They're watching the same channels. Like this is mainly back uh, when there were fewer channels that people could watch. Like people were mainly watching the same set of shows. Like whether it's like I'm thinking of a show like Cheers or Seinfeld, where most people, because I think that was CBS, which was one of the main channels. So even if you didn't like it, you knew what it was, and you probably, even if you didn't like it, you probably watched it, like, just out of sort of necessity, just because of the limits. And I feel like, on the one hand, I feel like convenience when it comes to entertainment, in this case, it creates these pockets of, uh, audiences, even if the bubble is wide somewhat. It's still a bubble, and everyone having their own entertainment bubble that sometimes intersect with each other. But oftentimes there's this kind of there's like a lack of a not shared culture, but like a mono sort of pop culture, which not everything. Like I realize some people take this as like a negative, and not everything that is like the top of pop culture is instantly good just because it reaches the top. But I feel like having the sort of shared entertainment culture is, I think it's a good thing. And that was mainly the main thing I wanted to touch on for this third beat. And I feel like I've covered my bases when it comes to this subject, which I said can branch off to a variety of different things. But I feel like for today, I'll wrap things up here. Again, my name is Ian Stewart. This is The Lion's Roar, and I will be signing off.